Hey, and welcome to the channel. My name's Chris, Christopher, Christoph, depending on when, where, and how you met me. The channel is predominantly going to be about project cars, these beauties, new stuff coming in, and then reviewing them at the end. There's also going to be quirky stuff like my dad's penny farthing if people are interested, and maybe a separate channel to do with a property renovation. But to kick things off, we'll start with this 2002 MX5. Welcome, and here we go with another MX5 review. Like there wasn't enough already, right? So here we are. I mean, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history if you don't already know, but if you're watching an MX5 video, I'm sure you already know a lot about these cars. So there's 4 generations now: NA, MB, NC, and guess what, ND. And this particular one is my MB. So 2002 with the 1.8, so it's a 2.5, a Mark 2.5. So if you don't know the difference, there was a Mark II, and then in 2000, I believe, or 2001, they did a facelift. And the facelift had a slightly modified bumper, projector type headlights, a few other little bits, but more importantly, all 2.5s came with variable valve timing. So it's like the equivalent of VTEC, but for Mazda. So you got slightly more power. So this is 145 horsepower. You also got the 1.6 as well. That carried on. That was 110. So the MX5, I mean, they originally came out in 1989, and they were a take on old British sports cars. I mean, it's like an older land, but it works. They very much feel like a British sports car with a Japanese badge. So the NA started in 1989, and that's the famous one with the pop-up headlights. Everyone loves it. And they decommissioned that and they brought out this one, mainly because of crash safety and pedestrian safety. I mean, it had 2 pop-up headlights, and if you got hit as a pedestrian, probably wouldn't be so great for you. So they've smoothed off. You get the funny looking headlights on this. Not many people like it. This actually I really like, especially with this facelift. I really prefer the facelift to the smiley faced pre-facelift, and you get the extra power in the 1.8, so that's always great. It's a really revvy, both are really revvy little engines, and you really need to wind them out to get the power out. 5.5. I was going quite quick. That was third gear pull. But you really need to rev the engines out. Really Japanese, really nice, naturally aspirated engine. They rev to like 7,200 RPM, and that power's all at the top end. This isn't a new school turbo setup where you've got loads of power and torque down at the bottom. There's not much happening down there. Below 3, don't bother. Now, the 1.6 is fine, it's a bit slow. The 1.8 is better, still not really fast, but at least I think a 1.8 is reasonable, and you can have some fun with the 1.8. I don't see why you would go for the 1.6. You might as well go and get the 1.8, especially nowadays. The tax is almost identical. And yes, the 1.6 is lighter, maybe more in character with the car, but just get the 1.8. I mean, the car weighs just over a ton, slightly heavier than the Mark I. It has got 2 airbags, something that the Mark I didn't have. It's just got slightly chubbier, but not by much, and it still feels super agile and light, and whenever you get into this car, you realize how light it is through the steering wheel. This one's got an open diff and the 5-speed, so this is like a bog standard facelift. If you want an LSD, which I would definitely recommend, and it's a Torsen LSD, it's a really good LSD that comes stock with the. It's either the Sport or the SVT. Those are the 2 that got it. And you also got a 6-speed box and a few other like luxury items like heated seats, which I just have a blank plastic button for mine. So how does this feel on the road? So the suspension is set up softly. It's definitely set up really softly. And to be honest, for how bad our roads are getting, it's not even a bad compromise. It's an 8/10 kind of suspension setup. You don't want to thrash it, you want to drive it briskly, and that's how that car feels at the moment when it's in stock form. It's really quite comfortable. And if this was a daily proposition, which I'll talk about later, it's very livable. And that's the benefit of these. The suspension, like if you're dailying it, yeah, maybe keep it on stock suspension. But even if you are, get some nice coilovers for it. It's double wishbone suspension all around. And you can get great coils for not that much money. Like in the UK, we have so many options. Get yourself a pair. You can lower a bit. I mean, it's pretty low already, but I can keep the dampening nice and soft. Find you don't have to get like super hard springs. And I think the reason is this, although it's a monocoque chassis and not like a ladder frame, it has got the gearbox and the diff is all connected by one like ladder frame component down the middle, so you can almost have like a rolling chassis of this car with all the body work off, and that, I mean, it's not the stiffest thing, and with the roof off, you can definitely feel scuttle shake. I'm not going to say it's like some sort of carbon fiber tubbed car, but for this price point back in the day, I think it's a pretty stiff chassis. And if you get yourself a hard roof like this, a hard top, they're like £300-400, then it becomes pretty rigid. And that means you can have softer springs and you can have that compliance, and you don't have to feel like you're breaking your back on potholes, but still have a nice level ride. And you can definitely feel that in this car. Oh, there's a MX5 behind us, how funny. The brakes are all right for stock brakes. They're really not too bad. I think if you push even on the road, if you're pushing hard down some country lanes, they do start to fade, and I would say 15 minutes and they're starting to fade. So, but there's so many aftermarket options. You can get bigger brakes, better pads, better discs. They are discs all round and the fronts are vented. But they're so easy and they're cheap to upgrade, so definitely worthwhile if you want a little bit more braking power. The tyres, I've got budgets on here and they're still grippy enough. In the wet it's a bit sketchy, but if you put some sticky rubber on this, you won't run out of grip. And in the wet you can have some fun and you can get the tail out, but in the dry with some sticky rubber, this thing's pretty planted to the floor. It's like a really nice neutral setup. You can definitely feel that like 50-50 weight distribution. Doesn't feel heavy at the rear. It corners in nicely. It really likes to change direction quickly. And that's all because it just doesn't weigh much. I mean, so this is just over a ton. My M3 weighs half a ton more. I mean, I love that car, but you can feel that extra half a ton of weight. It doesn't want to turn in as rapidly as this. Same with a Porsche Boxster. It's still 300 kilos heavier than this, and I'm talking about the 986, which I'll do a review on. Now the interior is definitely nothing to brag about. It's exactly what you expect from a early 2000s Japanese car. One color plastic. It looks like one big mold. Yeah, well, there is actually some soft touch areas here, but I wouldn't rave about it. It's durable. It looks easy to wipe down. That's what it is. It does the job. No one really cares. I don't care. It looks fine. But more importantly, driving position's almost exactly spot on. Pedal position, perfect. If you want to heel and toe, no problem. It is exactly right. So easy. You come into a corner, you want to change down, it's right there. Gearbox, they always get the gearbox spot on. So easy to chuck around this car. So much grip. And when it does step out, it's so balanced. heel and toe, brake, flip the throttle into the next gear, done. Turn in, beautiful. There is a hint of understeer. I'm sure you can change that with some spring setup, suspension setup, maybe stiff anti-roll bars at the rear, and we hit a van. Not literally, I mean like in front of us, traffic-wise. So the interior, yeah, driving position is perfect. I would say, okay, nearly perfect. The hit point for me feels a bit high. I feel like I'm sitting just a tad high. I don't want to be up in the lofts like I am. I'm not even that tall, I'm like 5'10". Yeah, I wish I could just lower the seat fractionally. The only other complaint I have is for this model, and I don't know why, well, I probably do, it's probably straight out of like a Mazda 6 of the time. The steering wheel is way too big for this car. And I know like airbag technology wasn't that great back then, so they're pretty big, and that's why the steering wheel is so big. And yeah, it's just silly. Like I can touch, my knees touch it all the time. So that's not the best. But you know, get an aftermarket one. Get a nice Nardi in this. Who needs airbags anyway, right? Now let's talk about the bodywork. That's where this car suffers, and the Achilles heel of MX5s, especially NBs like this, is rust. They rust. They love to rust. They love to rust on the seals. They love to rust on the rear arches, the front arches. And to add to this one that the NA didn't have is they love to rust the front chassis rails. The front chassis rails on this are double skinned, which on the NA they weren't, and they did that for crash protection again. But what happens is water gets trapped between the metal, it rots from the inside out, and it's disastrous. This had it, I had no idea, because you can't really see it when you're just looking at a car. You really have to like take all the under trays off and the panels, and then you can see the chassis rails, and these were rotten. MX5 Restorer do a kit, so if you're handy with a welder and you can cut all the metal out, and that's what I did. You can fix the chassis rails, or you can just take it to them. I'm sure other people do it too, and I think it's like 500-600 quid, and you can get, essentially they fit new chassis rails, they cut all the old rust out, but so many of them are rusty on the chassis rails, so definitely look out for that. Now, I would recommend a hard top if you are going to daily this, especially in the winter. It makes a big difference. It doesn't get as damp in here. All Mark IIs, I think, came with, at least the facelifts, came with rear heated glass, which is a treat. They also came with two options, vinyl and mohair roof. Now, mohair, I only found out is like, it's actual like breed of sheep, and they used the fur, is it the fur? The wool? Anyway, mohair roof, way better than what I have, is a vinyl roof. And the problem with the vinyl is if you take it down and it's not a warm day, it will crack, guaranteed. At this point here, just behind your head, on both sides, exactly what mine's done. And the vinyl, it's just not as nice in any way, but it's cheaper. But just beware, if you do get a vinyl roof, don't go taking it down when it's -5, which all MX5 drivers seem to love to do. Should you get one? Well, what's it like living with it? If this is your only car and you can accept that the practicality is not great, the glove box is okay. I mean, it has one. A Boxster, early Boxsters don't have a glove box up to 2002. Mine still didn't have a glove box. The boot's all right for such a tiny car. The boot's all right, but if you can live with a small car, then yeah, you don't have to carry lots of stuff around. Get it. Maintenance, they're pretty bulletproof. The engines are pretty bulletproof. You have to do the cam belt. Thing is, they're non-interference. So if, like me, it was the first cam belt I did, and cam belt's scary, like, oh, what if I f the valves? It's non-interference. There's nothing to worry about. If you get it wrong, it just won't run right. If you're a tooth out or 10 teeth out, it just won't run. So it's a great starter engine if you want to get into mechanics. They're really easy to work on, really well built. Parts are plentiful. The best thing about this is the community loads of forums, and the aftermarket support is huge. So you can run these on a tight budget. Getting in and out of it, if you're young, no problem. It is a bit of a pain. It's like a small door, it's low down. So on a day-to-day basis, if you're hopping in and out of the car lot, it is a bit of a nuisance. Not a big deal though. Noise. Now, it's not the last word in luxury and refinement. And the cabin, especially if you're doing lots of motorway miles, it's noisy. And it's a buzzy engine. As I said, it really likes to rev, and it likes to rev on the motorway as well. You're hitting 3.5 plus if you're cruising at around 70 miles an hour. You know, if you're doing over 70, 75 mile an hour, you're probably near 4,000 RPM. It's a bit noisy. The wind noise around here where the seals are, not great. I wouldn't recommend doing lots of motorway miles. Also, aircon, an option. So if you feel like you need aircon in the UK, I don't really care about aircon. There's only like 3 days in the year which I feel like I need to use it, and it's a convertible. Just put the roof down, you'll be fine. So then you ask yourself, all right, so I want a 2-seater sports car. I don't want to spend over £3,000 or so. What do you get? Well, there's not many options, and there's definitely not many options that are this comprehensive. So the closest rival, I think, is probably the Toyota MR2, the Mark III, the last one, right? Firstly, I don't think it looks as good, but that's subjective. Yes, it's mid-engine, that's cool. Harder to work on, it's mid-engined, but you can pick them up cheap. Now the MR2 also has no space. This at least has a boot. The MR2, I mean, the boot is questionable if you can even call it a boot. It's more like a glove box in the back. So there's really no space in an MR2. So bear that in mind if you're thinking to go down the MR2 route. There's not as many. The aftermarket's not as good if you want to do turbos and upgrades. I mean, what else you've got? You've got the Z3 of this era. I've driven one. There's a review coming for that. That's a cool car, but to be honest, it's a different kettle of fish. That is more of a Grand Tour sports car. It's definitely heavier than this. It doesn't turn as nicely as this. It's not direct or as direct. I don't like the seating position or the pedal position. It's an E36, so if you've ever driven that, you'll realize the pedal position is pretty crass. So be prepared to get the same. And it's an old BM, a lot more brakes. Still cool cars, and you can get the 2.8 straight 6, which sounds amazing. Great power out of those. We'll put the M50 manifold on there, get 225 horsepower out of it. So they are cool cars, but there's a different type of car. So if you're looking for something a bit more refined, that is probably a good thing to do motorway miles in. That's the one to go for. If you want something that's more nimble, agile, you can take to a track, easier to modify, this is the one you want to go for. Other things, MGF, I've never driven one. I don't know much about MGs at all. But really, MGs now, maybe. Fiat Barchetta's the other one, front wheel drive. Again, really, you're looking for a sports car, you want a front wheel drive car. Not my kettle of fish. And that's it. I mean, the only other thing I can think of is the Boxster, but then to get anything decent, you want the 3.2S, and that's going to cost you 5, 6, 7 grand now. They're not going down in price. The 2.5s, yeah, maybe you can pick one up for 3K, but these are like 1,500 quid still, and you can get a nice one for 1,500 quid. So then when you look at your options, what do you end up with? You end up with this. Get one before you can't afford them anymore. They've all rusted away. They've been taxed out of existence, and all you can have is electric. Hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe if you did. Have a great day. I'm going to enjoy some country roads now.